Hi, I'm Natalie, and it's really lovely to meet you today. Well, we've met before, Katie, but it's lovely to be chatting with you today. So yeah, why don't we just start with an introduction of who you are, what your role is, where you work, and then we can go from there.
Great. Yeah. So my name is Katie Barron, and I am a trends forecaster and it's Foresight Director for Stylus, which is a global agency, trends intelligence agency. And my role is I head up everything to do with retail and brand communications and pop culture and media. So ostensibly, I am really looking at anything where there is a fan or a consumer touch point. So that could be store design, it could be apps, it could be virtual commerce, digital commerce, omni-channel retail, internet culture, the whole kind of wide world of where there's that direct connection between a brand and its fan base, basically.
Nice, lovely. Can you maybe share a little bit about your journey into becoming, the Trends and Foresight Director at Stylus?
Yeah. So after university, I went pretty much into retail, actually. So I worked I was coordinating visual merchandising teams. So initially for Habitat and then for Liberty, when we were going through this amazing transition at Liberty with the entire creative team. And it was becoming a real kind of powerhouse to rival Selfridges at the time. And after that, I went on to work as a producer for Mary Portis's agency, which was at the time called Yellow Door. After that, I transitioned into media and publishing. So I was an editor at Harper's Bazaar for a couple of years. So very much involved in the kind of, brands via the lens of editorial image making. And then Stylus. But around all of this before Stylus, I was also writing a lot for magazines like Dazed, and particularly Glass magazine, for which I was the architecture editor, where again, I was writing a lot about the sort of physical brand environment. As an engagement space, really. So I've been the brand and the agency, and now I'm the sort of the strategist supporting brands and agencies. Yeah,
that sounds like you had all the sort of right experience in order to get to this one particular role, which is really great. I'd love to hear a little bit more on the actual trends, because obviously, I guess, how do you identify and differentiate between, fleeting fads and long-term shifts in customer behavior across various industries?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say initially is that, and thinking about the type of things that drew me to the role at Stylus was because, when we started back in 2010, it was really a kind of antidote to trends forecasting businesses that were quite siloed into sectors without any sort of sense of cross-pollination. So there was a feeling at the time that traditional trends forecasting businesses were sort of spawning identikit design and sort of styling really innovative thinking, which is very much feeds into the way that we think about how we sort of focus on analysing trends that spread across various industries and how you'll have something that will start in one sector and then will snowball into another. So I guess, my role at Stylus, as I mentioned briefly, is very much to kind of join the dots between societal shifts, consumer or fan behaviours, if you like, and emerging technology, and then join the dots to brand strategies. So it's this kind of always on sort of moving set of tectonic plates, which is exciting and a bit exhausting. And what we do when we're sorting the fads from the seminal shift, it's really about a kind of rolling process of monitoring key macro drivers and their impact on the status quo. So that could be anything from, an aging economy to the continued cost of living crisis, expanding urbanization, paradigm shifts in working practices, the rise of virtual economies, the advent or proliferation of certain technologies. And then we do that alongside the sort of more micro or, arguably more fleeting attitudinal shifts. The sort of things that might be incubating on social media and within internet culture, because those things, realistically also impact the way that consumers are spending their money or the way that they're interacting with one another. And I think with us, it's very much about looking at all those things together to ensure that you sort of talk with legitimacy about how brands need to connect, communicate, and ultimately to tell stories. So it's very much about kind of understanding which of those. I think, it's important to mention that, we do look at shorter term fads. So we have a really great series called Internet Culture 101s. Because as my colleague Annie Corser, who works on those, says, pop culture is really the soup that we all swim in. But what we do, just going back to that question about the sort of shorter fads versus solid, robust trends, is that we're usually focusing on the cause that are indicative of something that's much more deep-rooted, a sort of wider-reaching trend or shift. So even when we're talking about things that might sound a bit kind of low-level and a bit bonkers, like unhinged TikTok or corporate core, we'll have selected those because of their connection to sort of richer world of work, in that instance, directions, which, you know, might be therefore talking about anti-ambition or soft living or something else. So it's about kind of understanding, you know, as everybody knows, and there's so much talk at the moment about, you know, is trends sort of, a trend's dead? Is it just about vibes? But realistically, of course, trends aren't dead. We just know that you know, as we say, it's about discerning which are the ones that are rooted to something deeper and which are the ones that are going to be very flash in the pan. Does that answer your question with that one?
Yeah, in a very robust way. I loved it. And I guess, you know, on the topic of trends, I'm curious what you see as the, you know, biggest emerging trend in how brands connect with their customers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really broad question. But I think if we were to talk about specifically digital transformation, you know, we can't really get away without talking about AI. And why would we want to get away without talking about AI? There are so many ways that brands can manifest, and we did a really big piece of work on this last autumn, which actually I'm just constantly updating. It's a mega series called Life in AI, where we talk about how AI will change things across, you know, 5 areas of our lives. So commerce and communications, creativity and entertainment, humanity and values, work and learning, and also companionship, connections and intimacy. And so there is so much for me when it comes to retail, particularly in the first one and the last one. So thinking about commerce, which is obvious, but also the stuff to do with connections and companionship. So the sorts of things we were talking about that in terms of the trends within that, we were talking a lot about language and conversational commerce. So we were looking a lot at chatbots that can understand accents, colloquialisms, sort of zeitgeisty language, things that would pull from, again, what was happening in this big soup of the internet. We looked a lot at higher tech preparation, so helping people plan to be able to sort of project into the future. You know, whether it's about consuming less, because the AI will help you work out what you've already got, or literally generative AI allowing you to sort of look at your skincare regime into the future. We talked about connectivity in terms of also things that previously would have been static and dull, very pedestrian things like, you know, a digital ticket for click and collect, becoming conversant chatbots that could entertain and inform you in real time. And also things like coaches, you know, avatar-based coaches that can help you through a thing. You know, I think if we're talking about this world of retail, which it's always been to an extent, but I think with AI, we know we're looking at what happens when you get that coalescence between brand culture and companionship. You know, we saw a great chatbot which has been released by a company called Soul Machines, which was specifically designed to de-stress Christmas, for instance. So I think, you know, this is something we're looking at a lot. We're looking at, you know, agentic AI is something that I'm talking about a lot in presentations at the moment. So that, again, like that idea of planning, whether it's helping you plan your entire grocery trip and telling you, you know, how to budget, what to cook, how you cook it, getting it to your house, or for financial planning, you know, helping you in real time work out how you get to buy the house that you want to buy, when your finances might be changing quite regularly. So this idea of companionship is something that I'm a bit obsessed with, because I think it's always been the kind of bread and butter of what good connective retail is. So I think, you know, and the last thing I'd mention on this, I'm making this a very long answer, but the last thing I'd mention is, because we have the beauty of sort of sibling directories with having retail and brand comms, but also pop culture and media. You know, I look at gaming a lot, and I look at things that are happening in gaming, technologies, ideas, modes of behavior that will shift into retail. And we're looking at the moment at sort of like non-player characters that can actually operate at least partly on their own to sort of help you do a thing, which is of course massive for gaming, but super relevant for retail as well. There's a company called Operative Games that's actually working on characters that you can even, you know, contactable outside of games by videos and texts, etc., or a call. So it's really quite a wild world. So I think, you know, for brands, we're thinking about characters online and chatbots where conversations keep on rolling, whether things have a memory. And I think for me, that is going to be one of the really big game changers, because people haven't really cracked that yet, but all the tools are there kind of to be nurtured.
On the, as we're talking about AI, and obviously Stylus advises a lot of brands on innovation, how do you sort of see technology like AI and immersive experiences reshaping customer engagement strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's really important to note that AI and immersive experiences aren't one and the same, but obviously there also are projects where there's a big overlap. So for instance, to give you an example, something that's commercially very popular and really interesting in a lot of ways, bridging these two worlds, is Ray-Ban's collaboration with Meta on its latest smart glasses. Obviously, smart glasses for a long time, they look different, they look clunky, people weren't really into wearing them. But all of a sudden you have these glasses that look like Ray-Ban's regular glasses, and they'll include these AI XR agents. We're seeing a lot of this. They're going to move into phones, headsets, smart glasses. And these are, it's sort of, to explain them very basically, are tools capable of reading the world around us. So obviously they're going to become really prized guides. And I think what you see in terms of this immersive experience, with Ray-Ban and Meta, there's been this gradual inclusion of new features, multimodal AI. So it will process what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're reading, along with live AI translations. So, it will know if you're holding up a garment, it will know what it is because it can see it, and it will know how it connects to your preferences. And on top of that, you have this more immersive world where you can have audio cues or AR cues layered on, which A, can be more theatrical, but B, is great for supporting disabled users. So on lots of levels, there's really exciting things happening here. I mean, I think, I've quoted this stat quite frequently, but it's such a good one, and it's probably just even got up in the last sort of 6 months or so. But 55% of consumers globally really want to use AR or VR while shopping. So, I think when you know about these things that are kind of more practical, but also, that statistic shows you that I think we're going to see a lot more in terms of in-store or pop-up experiences that have a kind of more transformative nature as well. Like being able to go and sit in a car showroom, a flagship, and experience what it's like to be on a test drive in a particular car because of the visuals, but also because of the sound, possibly haptic technologies. I think we're going to see really big shifts in terms of that crossover between immersive theatre and great creative brand environments, because also, again, post-pandemic, we're seeing this huge appetite for really exciting communal physical experiences happening. So I think whether it's through headphones or headsets or but that idea to be able to connect in a way that feels more immersive. Immersive is a word used a lot by retailers, where actually they just sort of mean an online experience. But with this, I'm really talking about those things where you have a blend of technologies to kind of create these mixed reality things, which I think is really exciting. Also, loads of good stuff happening with AI, I think, where we'll see, being able to be in a store and pick up a phone to contact a fictitious or a sort of long gone sort of designer or brand ambassador or things like that, or connect with a holographic experience. So I think there's immersive stuff that's great on a practical level, but also some really super exciting theatrical stuff coming up too.
It's all very exciting, and I, for one, am one of those people that's very, pro AI and all of the tech that's coming out but I am just curious about the human connection behind all of this.
Yeah.
Because obviously many brands, well, I don't know, but I assume many brands struggle to sort of balance that data-driven insights with authentic human connection. So in your opinion, what are some of the best practices for brands looking to achieve this balance?
I think it's a really good connection. And, I think with AI, obviously I'm talking about some of the really positive new concepts that I'm seeing, but I'm, obviously my job is to be very cynical as well. And I think what we saw a lot when we were doing the Life in AI, when we started it, Life in AI piece last year, was that need to ensure that there is a point at which sort of human intervention is proposed and is there to ensure that you're sort of facilitating human agency. So you have this sort of positive pro-human experience as well. So I think for me, this is very much from a brand perspective about, using the amazing capacity to synthesize a lot of data surface kind of recommendations and ideas, but then which a creative human expert can bring into the mix and sort of take it to the next level. I think, to take this out of retail for a moment, I think it's interesting if you look at what's happening with a lot of dating apps, where there is a focus on using technology and AI to make initial connections and then driving people back to this kind of beautiful messiness of real life. I think, you know, there's a really interesting statistic I saw at another conference quite recently where they were saying that, you know, Gen Z is the first digitally native generation who are very much looking to, you know, rethink their relationship with social media and with big technology. And actually lots of them are saying they really want help with how, you know, how to create connections in real life. So I think that idea of kind of getting back to the messiness of real life. And you see it in therapy apps too, going back to that companionship narrative. You know, there's an app called Wiser that considers itself, I think it calls itself the first step care. So it's a clinically validated, text-based app, cognitive behavioral therapy tool, and it will check in with users every morning and evening, and it will give advice, and it's got this kind of work sort of toolbox with it to help you help yourself. But generally it's about kind of working out what's happening and then kind of sort of pushing people back towards the appropriate therapy sessions with real people, real experts. You know, and I think retail will and should sort of follow this. It's a bit like triaging in a lot of ways. You know, we know one of the big things I mention here is that we'll know that AI, it's got a yes man narrative fundamentally. So AI always wants to give you an answer, even when as humans we know that actually there may not be an answer yet. We may not be there, or there might not be something appropriate. So I think there are lots of kind of guardrails, lots of stop gaps to be thinking about. I mean, I think, you know, thinking about it from a retail perspective, there's some really lovely AI tools that talk about that kind of interlace between the AI and the human expert, where, you know, you might have somebody that's using a barcode reading tool where actually the AI will be able to synthesize, you know, tons, an absolutely ginormous amount of raw data. And then with that, it will be able to kind of to sort of section that into bullet points, 4 bullet points to someone that's in the store, will able to kind of use them to arm them with the information, but fundamentally it allows them to be who they are, to showcase their expertise, you know, whether you're a beauty expert or a marathon runner or whoever it may be. So I think there's some really good stuff with that coming. And I think, if I may, there's one other case study that I really wanted to mention, because again, this is sort of my favorite thing when I sort of think about things that partly in retail but haven't quite been exploited yet as much as they could be. I did a presentation called Moving Brands quite recently, where we talk about enshrining human creativity into some of these concepts. And there was a project, an installation at Miami Art Week in December 2024, that was all about going up to a sort of mic and talking about your dream, and it would kind of translate it in any language, then you would see it on the wall in front of you. Now, it's interesting because you could do that in a store, because we've got the technology already happening in e-commerce. There's a company called Daydream that's got this sort of chat to shop search engine where it sort of visualizes the things that are your own dreams and then serves you similar options. And I think, you know, that's something that could be beautifully partnered with people in the store, where you could kind of start to get to a sort of more collaborative place where actually people, not everybody can articulate what their dream is. So actually, again, there are loads of places where I think it's all about brands being mindful of the places where they can intervene with their expertise. I think, you know, if you don't have a perspective, if you don't have, you know, your own expertise or your perspective or your personality as a brand, you're going to be more lost than ever when we get into this kind of bigger AI era, because, you know, otherwise you get into this sort of mulch where it's a bit like if we all start having all our emails or our presentations written for us by ChatGPT, there's going to be this kind of homogeneity across everything. So it's about the interventions. Sorry, that was another very long answer, but I'm quite passionate about that.
No, I think it's great. I think honestly, there's like so much nuggets of wisdom in there. And I was like, yeah, so thank you for your long answers. I really appreciate them. And I'm sorry to move away from tech and AI, because I can feel the passion, but I'm going to have to move away from them now, because I want to get a better understanding of like your thoughts on consumer behavior and loyalty. So obviously, again, you work with many brands. What would you say are the common mistakes that brands do when trying to, you know, build long-term customer relationships, and how do you think they can avoid them?
Yeah, so Again, this is another really interesting question, because loyalty is one of those, it's a perennial issue for any brand, of course. And I was looking at the data for this really recently, and this new data is saying that loyalty specific brands fell. It's not gone to a tiny proportion, but it's gone from about 77% to 69% from 2022 to 2024. But there's been quite a big jump in increase in loyalty program usage, up from 2023. So it's not really a surprise to us, but we know that brand promiscuity is up. Still in a cost of living crisis, people want more from brands. But the interesting thing, and this is where I think it gets really good, is that true loyalty, which is defined as that which is driven by emotional connections rather than incentives, grew by 26% between 2021 and 2024. So there is that sense of, actually, although people, they want the bargains, they want the deals, they want to feel like they are winning at life in a lot of ways, it means that personalized experiences and things that are more value aligned are generating deeper connections. So when I was looking at loyalty recently, some of the trends that we were looking at were things like perks for participation rather than just purely spending. So it's about building those sort of bonds. How do you keep people locked in for longer and create these much more meaningful connections? So Selfridges starting to allow people to for use of various elements, whether it's the cinema or beauty services. Tracksmith, really great running brand, have got a kind of runner's passport now because they do a lot of stuff from the store, and then you can use that for awards later. You could always also call this kind of activity rather than acquisition. So Lego, if you actually buy the product and you're creating, you scan the directives for how to build a piece of a Lego kit, you'll get perks for that rather than just going on the website, or actually however much money you spend, you've got to do the thing. Frequency rather than cash spend. So for people dealing with younger consumers, I think that idea of frequency, not budget, is important. There's also been some really exciting stuff to do with sort of fan investment models, which I think is exciting because it's talking about, what I mean by that is where you take the brand on your kind of trajectory with you. So fans literally invest in various ways. So they contribute as if they were contributing to a startup. And then they'll get something back. Now, one of the best examples of this is a company called Rebag that's got this handbag scheme where you pay either $50 monthly or $500 annually, and it will convert it into not only shopping credit for you, so it's like a kind of savings account, you're saving this pool of money, but it will also give you something like a 2% interest on that every month. So that sort of investment, I mean, there are other forms of investment as well where you can literally, you're putting your money into it so you can see the company grow. Is really exciting. I mean, elective pricing starts to come in there as well. You've got brands like it's quite contentious because in some ways elective pricing sort of suggests the pay what you want model, that some consumers are going to be subsidizing others, which is contentious and sort of seems very unequitable in some ways. But in some examples of this, you've got brands like Hackles who are sort of saying basically, if you pay this price, that's paying for us to have people in our stores and the production costs. But for people that may be slightly more affluent, you can actually say, I'll pay tier 4 and I'll pay just a little bit extra, but that will also fund the capacity for the brand to create community projects like having a coastal sauna, for instance. So there are things like that where they're sort of based on having that kind of buy into the brand and sort of supporting to a level you can. I think, for what to go to your point about some of the mistakes, I think, as we know, people are really wanting to get the best deal, and it's really critical depending where you sit sort of economically at the moment. But for people that are going very hard on discounting only, when there's none of this kind of true loyalty, none of this emotional attachment, it becomes problematic, because if you don't have a speciality, you're kind of open to consumers jumping ship every time they get a shiny new offer or a better deal. And when AI starts to mediate these relationships for us and sort of searching for these deals, you'll be kind of cut out of the picture altogether. So, you know, as I said, we as consumers, we are all a very promiscuous bunch these days. So I think it's about that combination of ensuring that, yes, the deals are really important, but also you need to have that sort of speciality to seem to be being a kind of ally in some ways. Tesco is doing a great job of that. To use a very mainstream brand, you know, its loyalty card is super popular. And partly, not to get into AI again too heavily, but it's because they're implementing schemes that will, you know, observe your behaviours, things that are really imperceptible to the average person, to stop you wasting money, but also kind of nudge you into things which, unbeknownst to you previously, can sort of help improve your health. So there are really obvious benefits there on top of getting the rewards, the coupons, the money off, all of those sorts of things. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we only have time for a couple more questions. I'd like to sort of like look ahead. How do you sort of see customer expectations evolving in the next 5 years? Again, are there any sort of like upcoming trends that you've mentioned that you think brands should start prepping for now?
Yeah, I don't want to go too heavy into AI, but I think we did, you know, we talked about agentic AI and that idea of companionship, which does come in many forms, but I think that really is a huge one, because that sense of being a companion, whether it's pragmatic or preferably and or emotional from brands, is going to be really, really important to have somebody that will be seen as a kind of constant ally, a sort of shadow that has your best interests at heart. Consumers will want that. We've seen it post-pandemic, that though, you know, that idea of having something which is a really, in very real terms, makes your life better, is really important to creating a sort of more meaningful scenario. You know, as we've seen with sort of underconsumption, this idea that actually people are wanting to buy less because they don't want to overconsume, they don't want to waste money. You know, so part of that is helping people to be more frugal, but part of that is also saying, you know, we're going to help you live a more optimal life, which is a sort of the sexier aspect to that. I think we're going to see a much more personalized approach to health and well-being. Again, as I was talking about, those sort of super ego style nudges we've seen with Tesco. More digital fluency. I think there's still a lot of sticking points with omni-channel concepts where people really need to have their sort of profiles, join the dots between the profile, need to be able to go into a store, have handoff technology that allows you to take information you've seen at a store and then act on it at a later date. I think, you know, knowing who you are, where, you know, when you're opting into things. So I think that sort of sense of being able to go into a supermarket, tap your loyalty card onto a cart, and it to be able to sort of take you around the supermarket in the most beneficial way for you and give you offers. I think these sorts of things are going to be really important, the sort of digital fluency. On a more conceptual angle, a more conceptual tip, I think more ritualistic experiences actually that install, you know, the oldest of retail adages, you know, it's surprise and delight, are going to become really important. There's a perfume brand called Fern, and it's gone back to kind of quite an old school mode of behavior, almost like receiving letters, where if you sign up, you receive perfume every month. And what you get is this kind of beautifully packaged little experience where you'll get a card that gives you a ticket that you use to unlock digitally a video that they've created for you. It's almost like wrapping all the content that you get, like opening this incredible gift. And there's something very ritualistic about it. And I think, you know, we are seeing a return to that sort of desire to belong to sort of groups and fandoms. You know, fandoms, it's such a important time to be talking about consumers in terms of, you know, well, I'm quite averse sometimes talking just about people consuming, because a lot of the time brands are dealing with people where they are being a fan or an audience before they get to being a consumer. The idea that we just non-stop consume is quite tricky in a lot of ways. And talking about that idea of community and belonging in fandoms, I think we're going to see more robust iterations of blending community and commerce again, you know, sort of civic commerce, but in a way which is very much about stoking relationship to other people.
Thank you. I guess sort of like final question, and again, I think that you probably touched upon this throughout all of your answers, but without giving too much away, what do you think attendees can sort of expect from your upcoming session at FUTR Europe?
Well, actually, this is great, because maybe we didn't really maybe we talked about it inadvertently without really talking about it, but the idea of purpose. Now I'm so excited about this fireside chat because it's with Penny Brooke, CMO of The Body Shop. And I think being of my age, let's just say a younger bracket, Gen X, The Body Shop is really the OG of purpose-led brands. You know, Anita Roddick was a legend. It's having a bounce back. It's a very beloved brand. But the thing that's exciting is that we're operating in a very different world now in many ways. So what we're going to be talking about is, what does brand purpose really mean in 2025? You know, audiences are overwhelmed by eco-anxiety. They're suspicious of corporations. They're really fatigued by fleeting commitment to social causes. Politics has put us in a kind of very divided place in multiple nations, not just the obvious ones. So we're going to be talking about everything from, you know, what is a brand like that going to prioritize in terms of values? What are the hidden sentiments that people aren't talking about? We're going to be talking about actionism versus activism. So we're going to be talking about politics a little bit. We're going to be talking about the great art of marketing emission, which I think is so important. You know, we see this in eco comms all the time, that there are narratives out there that brands have been running for years and years with the best intentions, but that just do not resonate with people. So how do you creatively create campaigns that take the heart of your mission right to your fan base? And also we're going to be talking about, you know, heritage. How do you hitch your heritage when you've got an amazing heritage as a pioneer, as a purpose-led brand? But how do you hitch that to a purpose-facing mindset, which again I think is a preoccupation that brands are dealing with all over the place, really. Got a revolutionary legacy, but how do you make sure that you don't get stuck in that history and legacy? So fundamentally it's all about, what does purpose mean now at a time when people sometimes even say that we're in the post-purpose economy?
Honestly, I'm so looking forward to your session. And yeah, I'm very excited. The Body Shop has also come on board. That's going to be really great. And yeah, thank you, Katie, for all of your incredibly robust answers. Honestly, this has been so great for me to learn, and I'm so excited to share this with everybody else. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.